Imagine a master plan for human society, right? One that promises to completely solve climate change, eradicate global poverty, and just, put an end to human loneliness once and for all.
Which, I mean, sounds great on its own.
Right, it sounds like a very pragmatic sociological promise, but tucked right alongside all those logistical fixes, this exact same blueprint guarantees that half the human population is going to literally evolve into celestial beings.
Yeah, it is a completely staggering combination. You have the mechanics of global infrastructure sitting right next to literal divine transcendence.
It's wild.
Yeah.
So we are diving into a vision today that completely shatters the usual boundaries between engineering a better world and spiritual enlightenment.
Absolutely.
We pulled a stack of really fascinating materials for this deep dive, specifically 2 essays written by an author named Xuefeng. And these texts serve as the foundation for a radical utopian movement known as the Second Home, or Lifechanyuan. Our mission for you today is to unpack how this movement attempts to perfectly blend modern, cutting-edge technological progress with a complete, ground-up spiritual reimagining of what it means to be human.
And doing that requires us to completely discard our preconceived notions about utopian literature, to be honest.
Oh, for sure.
Because historically, when we encounter utopian texts or, return to nature movements, they follow a very predictable pattern. It's almost nostalgic.
Like going back to the simple life.
Exactly. There's usually this romanticized rejection of modernity. The author typically argues that the factory and the microchip are the sources of human misery, and salvation lies in retreating to the woods and living off the land. But Xuefeng aggressively rejects that premise.
He really does.
Yeah, he views going backward to achieve purity as a fundamental error.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I was genuinely caught off guard by how fiercely modern this vision feels.
It is surprising.
Right. Before we can even visualize what the daily life of the Second Home Society looks like, we really have to understand the author's foundational philosophy on technology. As you mentioned, the standard trope demonizes laptops and factories, but this text vigorously defends scientific advancement as part of the natural order.
Yeah, Xuefeng lays out this core argument that the way of the greatest creator is actually synonymous with the way of nature itself.
Oh, interesting.
And the crucial pivot he makes, the one that really separates this from a standard back to the land manifesto, is his assertion that scientific inventions do not inherently violate the laws of nature.
Okay.
In fact, he argues that abandoning science and technology in the pursuit of some mythical primitive purity would be a massive regression for humanity. Not a step forward at all.
And the author pulls no punches when describing what that regression would actually look like. I mean, the text explicitly states that returning to nature does not mean, and I'm quoting directly here, eating raw animal flesh and drinking its blood, or wrapping ourselves in animal skins.
Yeah, he is deliberately dismantling that romanticized hunter-gatherer myth with very visceral, jarring imagery.
It's super graphic.
It is. And the text emphasizes that humans have spent millennia creating splendid cultures and innovating our way out of brutal, primitive survival modes. To throw away the scientific achievements that relieved us from that suffering is, in Xuefeng's view, repeating the darkest mistakes of our ancient ancestors.
So it's about moving forward.
Exactly. The stated goal of Lifechanyuan is to inherit every single positive achievement of science and carry it forward into a new, elevated stage of human existence.
He makes this point using some incredibly vivid, honestly, kind of humorous analogies that bring this grand philosophy right down to, like, the kitchen counter.
Well, the knife analogy.
Yes. He asks the reader to consider a knife. A knife is an invention, right? Its natural intended use is for cutting vegetables to prepare a meal.
Sure.
But if a person takes that same knife and uses it to violently cut down a forest, or worse, commit murder, that is a misuse of the tool. You don't blame the metallurgy of the knife for the violence.
Right. The tool remains morally neutral. Its impact is entirely dependent on the consciousness of the user wielding it.
Exactly. And then he introduces toilet paper.
Yes, the toilet paper argument.
Which, I have to admit, is the absolute last thing I expected to read a philosophical defense of in a utopian manifesto.
It's definitely unconventional.
It really is. The author asks this very blunt question: is it better to use toilet paper or clods of soil?
And from a public health and sanitation perspective, the answer is undeniably toilet paper. It's an objective advancement in human hygiene.
But the text does acknowledge the environmental cost. It notes that if the manufacturer of that toilet paper pollutes a river while producing it just to maximize their profit margins, well, that creates a crisis.
Right.
But here is where I really found myself pausing. The text argues that the river pollution isn't the fault of the technology, the toilet paper, but rather the greed of the manufacturer.
Which makes sense on one level.
Sure, but so what does this all mean? If a corporation poisons a water supply for quarterly profits, is Xuefeng just taking massive systemic industrial failures and shifting the blame entirely onto individual human psychology? Because to me, that feels a bit like letting the systemic structures off the hook.
I see what you're saying, and it definitely looks like blame shifting if we view it through our current socioeconomic lens. But in Xuefeng's paradigm, there is no separation whatsoever between the individual psychology and the broader systemic structure.
Wait, really? How does that work?
Well, he believes the system is nothing more than a macro-level mirror of the individual human soul. He argues that the deepest crisis facing humanity isn't fundamentally economic, it isn't political, and it isn't even environmental.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, those are merely downstream symptoms. The root cause is strictly a crisis of the soul.
Oh, I get it. So if the soul is sick, the factory dumps toxins. But if the soul is healthy, the factory still produces the toilet paper, but they just find a way to do it without poisoning the water.
That is exactly the underlying logic connecting the entire text. The author claims that once this internal spiritual crisis is cured, every other crisis we face, from corporate pollution to geopolitical warfare, will just disappear automatically.
Just vanish.
Right. The irrational, destructive behavior driven by selfishness simply evaporates when human consciousness aligns with the will of the greatest creator.
Okay, so if we accept that premise, that the soul is completely cured of greed, the next logical question for you and me is, how does that actually play out on a random Tuesday?
The logistics of it all.
Yeah. Who is managing the logistics? What does daily life look like in a society where advanced technology is utilized purely without selfishness? And that brings us to the June 2020 essay, where Xuefeng outlines 21 very specific granular difficulties that the second home mode will permanently solve.
Yes, and this specific text introduces terms like Xuefeng-style communism and the New Eden Garden.
Right.
And it's really important to clarify here that when he uses the word communism, he is not describing the authoritarian state-run political systems of the 20th century.
Not at all.
He is describing
Yeah, the text makes sweeping promises about the eradication of daily human suffering. It claims women will be freed from trivial daily chores. The elderly will live happily, and it specifically notes they'll do so regardless of whether they have pensions or children to care for them.
And the underlying mechanism for these claims is the dissolution of the isolated nuclear family unit.
Right.
When the text promises the complete disappearance of orphans, it isn't because parents will stop passing away, it's because the community as a whole takes on the responsibility of universally loving and educating every child.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, the concept of an orphan requires a society that leaves children isolated when their biological parents are gone. In the second home, that structural vulnerability is just removed.
And the text applies that exact same logic to emotional suffering. It explicitly states that loneliness, the phenomenon of people remaining unattached and isolated, will disappear forever.
Which is a huge promise.
It really is.
Yeah.
And perhaps most significantly, it guarantees the complete eradication of domestic violence.
Again, we see the author's logic at work here. If you remove the traditional structures of ownership, financial dependence, and isolation, and you cure the soul of aggressive selfishness,
Yeah.
well, the environment that allows domestic violence to occur is entirely dismantled.
Here is where it gets really interesting, though. We have to look at the economic engine that makes all this possible. The text claims wealth disparities will vanish entirely. And the mechanism for this is a concept Xuefeng describes as having everything, yet owning nothing.
Which, let's be honest, presents a massive cognitive hurdle for those of us deeply entrenched in a culture of private property.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
To make this tangible for you listening, think about the modern subscription economy, but taken to an absolute utopian extreme.
Okay, I like this analogy.
So consider how you probably listen to music right now. You have access to millions of songs in your pocket.
Yeah.
You essentially have everything, but you don't actually own a single MP3 file or physical CD. You don't have to dust the CDs, you don't have to insure them, and you don't have to build shelves for them. Now, expand that concept beyond digital media. Apply it to housing, to food, to transportation, to healthcare.
That is wild to think about.
It's like a massive, seamless global library for every human need. You use what you need when you need it, and then it returns to the communal pool. Personal property becomes obsolete because hoarding is no longer necessary for survival or status.
It is a radical reimagining of resource allocation, but it inherently raises a structural question.
What's that?
Well, if you have a global library of housing and food, who is acting as the librarian? How does a society function without laws, courts, or government officials managing this incredibly complex web of shared property?
I found myself wondering the exact same thing. If nobody owns anything, what happens when two people want the exact same house by the beach?
The author answers this by pointing directly back to the concept of the aligned soul. The text assumes that the entire apparatus of societal control, so laws, courts, police forces, only exists to manage and punish human greed.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, if the internal desire to hoard is neutralized, the external mechanisms of control become completely obsolete. Xuefeng specifically writes that official corruption will disappear because officials will have neither need nor ways to corrupt.
Wow, so it's an entire society built on the honor system.
Yeah.
He asserts that courts, lawyers, and legal systems will die out gradually because they simply won't be needed to mediate disputes.
Mm-hmm.
Criminal activities are predicted to drop by 3/4.
Right.
It is a total reliance on internal moral alignment, replacing the need for external punitive enforcement.
It requires a profound leap of faith in the perfectibility of human nature. But just as you are wrapping your mind around the sheer scale of dissolving the global legal system, the text accelerates.
It really does.
The claims expand beyond the restructuring of human society and leap directly into planetary ecology and literal human evolution.
Yeah, this was the moment in the reading where I actually had to stop and reread a paragraph 3 times. We transition from pragmatic discussions about elder care and property law into claims of just breathtaking cosmic scope.
It's quite a shift.
The environmental promises begin with a human population that stabilizes perfectly, completely avoiding the chaos of sharp increases or collapses, living in harmony with planetary resources.
And the text outlines a total healing of the planet's biosphere. Atmospheric, water, and soil pollution are promised to disappear entirely.
Incredible.
Furthermore, the chaotic extremes of the climate will settle. The author describes a future free of climatic disasters, characterized instead by a consistent, stable climate with distinct, manageable seasons.
But the most staggering ecological claim is regarding biodiversity. The text says the extinction of species will halt, which, makes sense if human pollution stops.
Right.
But then it explicitly claims that many lost ones will return. Wait, stop. Does the text actually mean resurrecting extinct species? Like, are we talking about woolly mammoths and dodos suddenly reappearing?
The text is incredibly brief on this point, simply stating many lost ones will return. But within the context of the greatest creator's power, it strongly implies a healing of the earth so profound that the ecological clock is effectively rewound.
Wow.
Yeah, whether this is envisioned through advanced biological cloning enabled by pure science or literal divine intervention by the creator to restore the lost balance, the author presents the return of extinct life as a factual feature of this incoming era.
Which perfectly sets the stage for the ultimate goal of the Lifechanyuan blueprint. We move from resurrecting the ecology to the spiritual evolution of humanity itself.
This is the big one.
It is. The text claims that at least half of the people alive will sublimate, meaning that they will elevate to a higher dimensional state of existence, transforming into angels, bodhisattvas, celestial beings, and Buddhas.
It is a sweeping synthesis of multiple major religious traditions. You have Christian angels, Buddhist bodhisattvas, and Taoist celestial beings, all culminating in this single, unified, utopian era. And it is vital to note the author's role in this. Xuefeng explicitly positions himself at the absolute center of this transition, identifying himself as the spiritual guide of humanity.
He writes that he will lead people to an amazing future and even takes them to heaven. And immediately after making this monumental claim, he adds, this is not a boast.
Just a statement of fact.
Exactly. He assures his followers that if they stick with the program, they will experience this transformation step by step. The tonal shift in these essays is just wild.
It really is jarring.
In one paragraph, you are analyzing the hygiene of toilet paper and the logistics of a borderless economy, and in the next, you are facing the promise of sublimating into a literal Buddha. It forces the reader to ask, is this meant to be an elaborate allegory, like a poetic metaphor for simply becoming a better, more enlightened person?
And Xuefeng anticipates that exact skepticism and addresses it directly. He is adamant that these are not metaphors. He writes, do not take this as a joke or myth or consider it an armchair strategy.
Okay, so he's completely serious.
He is. He emphasizes that this model of the second home has been actively developing with what he calls firm evidence for 10 years.
Claiming 10 years of firm evidence for a society without laws where people turn into angels is a very bold stance.
It is. But perhaps the most revealing moment in the entire text is his final declaration regarding the inevitability of this future. He writes that whether you wish for it or not, and whether you believe it or not, humanity is bound to enter the Lifechanyuan era.
He frames it by saying, everything is running according to procedure.
Think about the phrasing there. Running according to procedure. It is not presented as a hopeful wish or a political campaign that requires your vote to succeed.
Yeah.
It is framed as a cosmic algorithm. The program has been compiled, the code is executing, and the outcome is already determined by the greatest creator.
Running according to procedure. That is such a uniquely modern, technological way to articulate a spiritual prophecy. It perfectly encapsulates the dual nature of this entire deep dive.
It really does.
To step back and look at the whole blueprint we've explored today, Xuefeng's second home is a master plan that demands a REIT-level overhaul of the human soul. It argues that by entirely eliminating our internal greed, we can dissolve borders, end the need for personal property, and render the global legal system obsolete.
Right.
It promises that we can keep the hygienic, comfortable perks of advanced science like our internet and our modern medicine, while simultaneously healing the climate, resurrecting extinct species, and securing a pathway for half the planet to evolve into celestial beings.
It is a total rejection of the idea that spiritual purity requires suffering, poverty, or a regression to primitive living. It envisions a future where supreme technological convenience and ultimate spiritual enlightenment are perfectly aligned.
Before we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to take a moment to remind you, our listener, of our mission here. Our goal is strictly to unpack and understand the fascinating architecture of the ideas contained within these specific texts. We are impartially reporting on Xuefeng's utopian and spiritual claims to illuminate how they fit together structurally. We are not endorsing any of the viewpoints, religious ideologies, or prophecies presented in the source material. Our job is simply to lay the blueprint out on the table so you can examine it for yourself.
But as you examine that blueprint, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over.
Go for it.
The entire Lifechanyuan text rests on the assertion that once human consciousness shifts and greed is eliminated, things like courts, borders, and personal ownership will naturally die out, leaving a perfectly peaceful society that still enjoys all the fruits of technological progress.
Right.
But consider the nature of that progress. If a society actually managed to eliminate all struggle, all competition, and all personal ownership, would human beings still possess the internal drive to invent, to innovate, and to create the very technology that Xuefeng says we must inherit? Or does human progress at its core actually require a little bit of friction?
Wow, that is a profound question. If you remove all the tension from the engineering, does the building still stand? Does the blueprint still work? It is definitely something to think about the next time you encounter a flawless plan for the future.